If you made it this far, you're braver than most. For more true horror, unsettling encounters, and the stories that keep you up at night, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be waiting with more. I want to start off by saying, I'm not the kind of person who imagines things. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I've never touched anything that might make me hallucinate. I'm your classic straight-edge type, so when I tell you that everything I'm about to describe actually happened to me last New Year's Eve, I need you to believe that it was real. Every chilling, terrifying moment of it. I live just outside a typical small town in the South. You know, the kind where everyone knows each other and the backroads are more like twisted trails through dense forest than actual roads. A couple of my friends live even deeper out into those backwoods, and one of them, Darren, lives in this really upscale neighborhood tucked behind miles of winding, narrow roads flanked by thick trees and no streetlights. You can only get there by taking one of two remote paths, and neither of them are roads you'd want to break down on at night. Every New Year's Eve, Darren's family throws this big party at their house. It's kind of a tradition. They go all out, decorations, food, fireworks, the whole 9 yards, and everyone who's ever been close with the family gets an invitation. That includes me. So when I got the invite in the mail, like always, I was excited. It's one of the few times of the year where I actually look forward to socializing. That year, the weather had taken a sudden turn just a few days before the party. Typical southern winter. One day it's 65 and sunny. The next it's 30 and windy as hell. By the time New Year's rolled around, it was cold enough to see your breath. And that didn't exactly make the drive out to Darren's house any more pleasant. The road I took that night was bumpy, neglected, and pitch black. I don't usually use my high beams because I hate blinding oncoming drivers, but this time I had to. There was just no visibility without them. The back road to Darren's place is surrounded on both sides by dense woods. Trees crowd the shoulders, some of them leaning over the road like they're trying to swallow it whole. And apart from one small, decaying shack maybe halfway down the stretch, there aren't any homes or signs of life between the main road and Darren's neighborhood. I've always gotten a weird vibe from that shack, though, like, sometimes I'd see a faint light on inside even though it looked abandoned. No power lines nearby, no driveway, just a sagging roof and boarded-up windows. Anyway, I'm driving along, brights on, music low, hands gripped tight on the steering wheel. I come up on this unusually straight portion of the road, and suddenly, out of nowhere, my lights catch something up ahead in the trees. Something pale, white, standing completely still just off the shoulder. As I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She was standing with her back to the forest, not moving an inch, just there. Her dress or gown, whatever it was, looked totally out of place. It was thin, flowing, almost glowing in the glare of my brights, and she was barefoot. Mind you, it's below freezing.
No coat, no shoes.
Just this pale figure in white. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I just stared as I passed her, trying to process what I'd just seen. My first instinct wasn't even fear, it was confusion. Like, who in their right mind would be out there dressed like that? Was she lost? Was she a party guest who got stranded? Should I have stopped? But then I checked my rearview mirror, and in that red-tinted reflection, I saw her. She had turned to face my car. She wasn't chasing me, just standing there, twisted slightly, watching me drive away. No movement, no expression, just staring. At that point, I decided I wasn't going to be the Good Samaritan. Nope. I wasn't about to stop on a rural road in the dead of night for someone who looked like they crawled straight out of a ghost story. I told myself she'd be fine, or that someone else would stop. I made it to the party around 8 p.m. The driveway was full of cars. The house was lit up, and people were already drinking and laughing like nothing in the world could touch them. Darren's place sits in a big clearing surrounded by more forest. Classic upscale southern style with space between each house like they're allergic to neighbors. I parked, shook off the weirdness, and went inside. Honestly, I kind of forgot about the woman for a while. The night was full of fireworks, party horns, champagne, and the awkward mingling that happens when you throw high school friends, their families, and random work colleagues into one space. Midnight hit twice, once for New York, then for our own time zone. People started trickling out, and eventually I was one of the last ones still hanging around, helping clean up. When I finally left, it was close to 1:30 a.m. My car was the last one parked out front. I got in, started the engine, and that's when the tire pressure light came on. Now, my car's kind of old, so it doesn't tell you which tire is low, just that there's a problem. But this happens every winter when the temperature drops fast. The air contracts or whatever, and the sensors freak out. I wasn't worried. I figured I could make it home just fine. But then I remembered her. That woman. What if she was still out there? There's another road I could have taken home. Adds about 20 minutes to the drive, but it's more traveled and slightly better maintained. I debated it for a second, but I was tired, cold, and figured I was just psyching myself out. I chose to head back the way I came. Big mistake. A few minutes into the drive, I noticed something was off. My car was shaking more than usual. And then I heard it, that awful metal on asphalt screech. Not one tire, all of them. The car came to a slow, grinding stop, and I knew something was seriously wrong. I had no choice but to get out and look. As soon as I opened the door and stepped out, the car's automatic lights cut off. Suddenly, I was swallowed by darkness. Pure, suffocating black. I turned on my phone flashlight and went around the car, inspecting each tire. Every single one shredded. Not like they'd been punctured by nails or glass, no, they were ripped open. Jagged tears, strips of rubber peeled away like something had clawed through them. No way that happened naturally. This was deliberate. Someone had sabotaged my car. And that's when everything went quiet. No wind.
No crickets.
Not even the rustling of leaves. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes your heart pound louder than it should. And then snap. A twig. Somewhere deep in the woods. I shut off my flashlight instantly. Couldn't see a thing. But I could hear. Leaves crunching. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Getting closer. Then out of the silence, a voice. I see you. Soft. Female. Right at the tree line, maybe 15 feet away. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My legs were jelly and my stomach felt like it dropped through the road. Then she spoke again. Can you see me? It was her. That same woman. I fumbled with my phone, finally switching the flashlight back on. And there she was, standing at the edge of the woods. The gown was no longer glowing white. It was filthy, tattered, stained with something dark. She looked like a walking corpse. Her skin was chalky and thin, stretched tight over her bones. Her hair was long, tangled, hanging down in matted ropes. But her face, oh God, her face, it was like half of it was missing. Her jaw looked torn away, yet she was smiling. Smiling at me like I was her long-lost friend. It was the most grotesque, unnatural grin I've ever seen. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran. Down the road, away from her, back toward Darren's neighborhood. I passed the shack again and couldn't help but wonder. Was that her home? Was she even human? Behind me, I could hear her crashing through the trees, chasing me, twigs snapping, leaves flying. I didn't stop. Adrenaline carried me the entire way until I saw Darren's house again and sprinted up the driveway, pounding on the front door. His mom opened it, startled, and quickly pulled me inside when she saw the state I was in. Darren and his dad came rushing over as I gasped out the story, shaking, drenched in sweat and fear. They believed me. They called the police, offered to let me stay the night, said I could make a statement in the morning and deal with the car later. I didn't even argue, I was too scared to go back out there. I just wanted to sleep and forget the whole thing. But the night wasn't over. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I woke up. There was a sound. A soft tapping on the second-story window of the guest room.
Top. Top. Top.
There were no curtains or blinds, just darkness beyond the glass. I didn't dare look. I just stared at the ceiling, paralyzed. Then I heard her voice again. I see you. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. She had followed me. All the way here. She was still out there. I stayed frozen in that bed until the sun rose. When Darren's family woke up, I told them what happened. We went outside together. And right there, on the edge of the front yard, we found it. A knife. A large, rusty kitchen knife, sticking up from the ground like it had been stabbed into the dirt. It didn't belong to Darren's family. The police came back later that day. They searched the road, the woods, the shack. No one was there. But they did find something. Dead animals. Scattered through the trees around that shack. Gutted. Arranged. Like someone had been living there, hunting. Waiting. They never found her. I don't know who she was. Or what she was. Or how someone missing most of their jaw could speak so clearly. All I know is this. I'm still going to Darren's next New Year's Eve party. But this time,
I'm carpooling.
and I'm taking the long way around. When I was 26, I took this short trip out to San Diego to visit a friend of mine. It wasn't anything too special, just a casual getaway to reset for a few days. Flights were cheap, and I needed a break. I stayed with her for a couple nights, explored a bit of the city, and had a pretty decent time overall. The plan was simple. Fly back late, get home, sleep, and head back to work the next day. I should have known something was going to go wrong the moment my return flight landed. It was just past midnight when we touched down. You know the vibe. Everyone's tired, shuffling down the jetway like zombies, eyes glued to their phones. I made my way down to the ground transportation pickup zone, pulling my little carry-on behind me, and started scanning the line of taxis and rideshares parked in the dimly lit curbside area. I didn't feel like waiting for an Uber. Prices were surging anyway, and half the drivers were canceling trips. I spotted a yellow minivan with a faded taxi light on top and waved him down. He pulled up slowly, rolled his window down, and asked where I was headed. I told him my address, and he said he'd take me for $30. Cheaper than Uber at that point, so I said, "Deal." He stepped out and offered to put my bag in the trunk, but I told him it was fine. I always keep my stuff close. I slid the bag onto the seat behind him and got in on the opposite side, diagonal from him with the middle seat empty between us. He climbed back into the driver's seat, tapped something into his GPS, and off we went. At that hour, the roads were empty. The whole ride should have taken about 30 minutes. Tops. We merged onto the highway, cruising at a decent speed. I leaned my head back, trying to relax. Then I noticed him watching me. The rearview mirror, it wasn't angled at the road behind us. It was tilted just slightly toward me. The first time I caught his eyes staring at me, I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just being alert, glancing around like drivers do. But then I caught him doing it again. This time he spoke. "So, where were you coming from?" "San Diego," I said casually. "Oh, very nice. You go there for business or pleasure?" "Just visiting a friend," I replied, still trying to keep it chill. He smiled in the mirror. "Is your friend as pretty as you?" I let out this awkward half-laugh, more out of discomfort than anything else. I didn't even know what to say to that. The comment came out of nowhere and landed like a brick. Like, seriously, dude? From there, his questions just kept coming. All slightly flirty. All very unwelcome. "What's a pretty girl like you doing flying all by yourself?" he asked, turning his head a little more than he needed to. I pushed back lightly. "Well, like I said, I was visiting a friend. I wasn't alone. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, but you're flying solo. That still counts." I gave him this half-hearted smirk and replied, "We can agree to disagree." He laughed again like he thought we were vibing, but I was just trying to keep things surface level and avoid making things worse. This man had to be at least 45. Not that age is the issue, it was the tone, the timing, the way he was leaning into the conversation like we were on some casual first date. And the thing is, this wasn't the first time I dealt with something like this. But usually, the boundary gets respected when you brush it off. Not this time. We'd been driving about 20 minutes now, and I started noticing familiar signs. The overpass by my exit came into view. I relaxed a little, thinking the ride was almost over. Then he passed it. Didn't slow down. Didn't even flinch. I leaned forward and said, "Hey, that was my exit." He glanced in the mirror and said, "Oh shoot. Sorry. I'll get the next one." I sat up straighter. "Did you put the right address in?" He didn't answer, just kept driving. The next exit was about a mile ahead. I was on edge now, watching the road, checking street signs. As we got closer, I said, louder this time, "You need to get off here." He finally turned his blinker on and exited, but not before giving me this sideways glance in the mirror. It wasn't exactly angry, but it wasn't friendly either, like I had inconvenienced him somehow. Then he hit me with the creepiest question yet. "So, do you have a boyfriend?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes, he lives with me." He gave this short nod. Didn't say anything for a second. Then, "What's his name?" I stared at him. Not a joke. He was dead serious.
Elite, obviously.
Gave him a fake name. But that was the last straw. I told him I was putting my headphones in, and I popped in my AirPods, even though they were basically dead. I just needed him to stop talking. I grabbed my phone and texted a few people, my parents, my brother, my best friend. I told them I was in a cab with a sketchy driver and that I was sharing my location in case anything happened. Only my older brother responded. Everyone else was probably asleep. He told me if I felt unsafe, I should get out. Anywhere public. Anywhere with people. But it was nearly 1 a.m. The streets were empty. Businesses were closed. And we were still 10 minutes from my place. Then we hit a red light. And he looked at me again. This time there was no smile. Just eyes. Cold. Staring at me through the mirror like he was trying to read my thoughts. I whispered, "The light's green," just to break the silence. He jerked the car forward like he'd been caught off guard. Then I saw it. Police cruiser. Parked off to the right in an empty lot. Lights off, engine idling. Without even thinking, I grabbed my bag, unbuckled, and threw the van door open. He started yelling, "Hey, what are you doing?" and hit the button to try and close the sliding door, but I forced it back open and bolted. I sprinted toward the cruiser, waving my arms, yelling for help. I didn't look back until I was halfway there, and he was already gone. He didn't come after me, didn't shout for his fare, just drove off. That told me everything I needed to know. The officer inside had seen me by then and rolled down his window. I gasped out the story, still shaking, explaining what had happened. He looked concerned, told me to hop in and he'd give me a lift home. I know, cops aren't taxis. But in that moment, I was so grateful. I just needed to get home. The ride took about 10 minutes. I let myself in, locked every door and window, and didn't even bother unpacking. I brushed my teeth and crawled into bed, exhausted. I had just started to drift off when I heard it, knocking, at my front door. I froze. It was quiet at first, just a few knocks, soft, spaced apart. Then silence. Then more knocks, louder this time. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. My phone was in my hand, but I didn't call anyone. I just listened. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I stayed up the rest of the night, heart racing, body tense, waiting for something else. Anything. Morning finally came. I went to work like a zombie. Couldn't focus. Couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, around noon, I got a call from my neighbor, George. He said, "Hey, just wanted to check in. Was your dad supposed to stop by this morning?" I said, "No, why?" George said he saw a man trying to peek into my windows. Said he looked like he was trying to get in, then wandered off. He figured maybe it was a family member dropping something off. But something about it didn't sit right with him. I told him it wasn't my dad. And that's when everything came flooding back. I called my dad immediately. He confirmed he hadn't been anywhere near my apartment. He was at work. Never left. I told him everything, the cab, the driver, the police, the knocking. He told me to come stay at their place. Just for a few nights. And I agreed. After my shift, I went home, packed a quick bag, did some laundry. But the second I walked into the apartment, something felt off. I've never been scared of being alone. I actually kind of like it. But that night, I felt watched. Like I wasn't truly alone. I started hearing sounds. Tiny creaks in the floorboards, soft thuds, barely there. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just anxious from everything that had happened. Then I heard it. A creak from down the hall, the spare bedroom, and a voice. "I wasn't going to hurt you." A man's voice. I spun around and saw an arm, just an arm, slide into view from behind the hallway wall. I didn't wait to see the rest. I bolted, threw the door open, ran to George's house, started pounding like a madwoman. He and his wife answered in a panic, and I told them someone was in my apartment. We didn't go back in. We called the cops. When they arrived, they searched every inch. It wasn't a big place, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. But the sliding back door was wide open, leading into the shared backyard. Whoever it was, they got away. I had no receipt, no name, no license plate, just yellow taxi and a vague description of the driver. I gave the police everything I had, what time I landed, which route we took, where I bailed out. They said they'd check traffic cams, local businesses with outdoor security footage. But I never heard anything more. I stayed with my parents for a week. My dad helped me install security cameras at both doors. I bought a taser and kept it by my bed. Eventually, I moved out, and then moved again, twice. I don't take taxis anymore. Not alone. Even rideshare apps aren't completely safe, but at least they leave a digital trail. That night made me realize just how easy it is for someone to pose as a driver. To watch, to follow, to wait. And sometimes it's not about the ride at all. It's about who's in the passenger seat. I've never really believed in haunted houses. Creepy, yeah. But haunted? Nah. I've always figured most of that stuff is just stories people pass around to spice up old buildings with a little mystery. And if someone really thought they saw or heard something, well, their mind probably filled in the blanks. But then I spent 3 nights in a guest room that locals called the Whisper Room. And now I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe sleeping anywhere ever again. This all happened a couple of years ago when I visited a friend named Rachel who had recently moved to Massachusetts. She'd inherited this gorgeous but super old colonial house just outside of town. One of those creaky, 3-story places with the original floors, a crooked chimney, and windows that didn't quite seal right. It looked like it belonged on a postcard, or in a ghost story. She invited me to come stay for a long weekend. I had just gotten over a rough breakup and needed to clear my head. So I said yes. The plan was simple. Visit Rachel, catch up, decompress. I didn't think much about the house until she gave me the tour. The first floor was charming. Kitchen, living room, an old dining room with warped floorboards and mismatched chairs. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. That's where I'd be staying. The guest room she pointed me to was small but cozy. Sloped ceilings, antique furniture, a little twin bed tucked against the wall. It was right next to the staircase with a tiny door on the opposite wall that led to a third-floor attic. I noticed the latch on that door had been reinforced with a padlock. Odd. But I didn't say anything. That night, after a couple glasses of wine and a long talk about life, Rachel casually mentioned something that made my stomach drop. "I should warn you," she said, only half joking. "Some people say that room's haunted." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Oh yeah. Yeah. The guy who sold me the house said that back in the 70s. A tenant swore she kept hearing voices behind the attic door. Said they whispered her name at night." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're just telling me this now?" Rachel shrugged. "You're not the superstitious type, right?" I wasn't. Or at least, I hadn't been. That first night, I didn't sleep well. I wasn't scared exactly. I told myself I wasn't. But there was something about the room that felt wrong. Not dangerous, just heavy. Like the air was thicker in there. Denser. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling for hours. The house was old, sure. Every step creaked, and the wind outside made the windows rattle. But there was one sound that didn't quite fit. Came from the far wall. The one with the padlocked attic door. A soft tapping, like fingers against wood. I froze, held my breath, told myself it was just the house settling. But then I heard it. My name, whispered, barely audible. "Alyssa?" I sat up in bed, heart slamming against my ribs. The room was dark. My phone said it was 3:06 a.m. I waited, ears straining. "Alyssa!" Again. This time louder. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the attic door. Nothing. I got out of bed, tiptoed over, and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Rachel. She laughed at first, then saw the look on my face and said, "Oh, you're serious." She offered to switch rooms. I said no. I didn't want to look like a complete coward. But that night, I went to bed with my phone flashlight on, the padlock in plain sight, and a chair wedged under the doorknob just in case. That's when things escalated. It started with the whispers. They came earlier, around 2 a.m., and they weren't just saying my name anymore. They were having conversations. Muffled, unintelligible, but constant. I put on my earbuds, tried to drown them out. Didn't help. Around 2:30, the tapping started. This time it was sharper, faster, like impatient fingers drumming on a table. Then I heard something slide, like a box being pushed across wood. And then, the doorknob turned. I jumped out of bed, grabbed the chair, bracing it harder under the knob. The doorknob twisted again. The padlock held. But the door was moving, banging slightly like someone or something was trying to force it open. And all the while, the whispers kept going. I ran to Rachel's room. She woke up confused, groggy. I told her what I'd heard, what I saw. She came back with me, flashlight in hand. When we opened the door, nothing. Just the quiet room. The padlock intact. No signs of disturbance. Rachel looked pale. "Okay. Maybe I should have mentioned this before," she said slowly. "But the last guest who stayed in here left in the middle of the night." She never got into the details, but I could tell she was starting to take it seriously now. We decided to open the attic the next morning, just to see what was up there. In daylight, things always feel safer. So we unlocked the padlock, slid back the latch, and pulled the door open. The smell hit us first. Musty, stale, like old clothes and dead air. Rachel climbed up first, I followed. The attic wasn't huge. Low ceiling, wooden beams, stacks of dusty boxes. A rocking chair sat by the only window, and there was a worn rug stretched out across the floor. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. until we saw the writing. On the far wall, in faint black marker, were the words, "Are you listening yet?" Underneath a list of names. Dozens. Maybe more. All written in different handwriting, different styles. Some had been scratched out. Some were circled. At the bottom of the list was mine. Alyssa, written in fresh ink. I hadn't been up here before. Neither had Rachel. No one should have known I was coming. My stomach flipped. We left the attic, locked it up again, and this time I took Rachel up on her offer. I slept in her room. But the third night, even that wasn't enough. At 3:00 a.m. on the dot, we both woke up. Every floorboard in the hallway was creaking, like someone walking slowly toward our door. Then it stopped. We didn't breathe, didn't speak, until the handle jiggled. Rachel got up, turned on the light, flung the door open. Nothing. But at the end of the hallway, the attic door was wide open. The padlock was on the floor. We didn't sleep again. We called someone the next day, some local historian who knew the area. Turns out the house had once been a boarding home in the early 1900s. One of the tenants went missing. A young woman named Eliza, last seen entering the attic. They never found her body, but every tenant after her reported hearing whispers, conversations, their name being called at night. The town started calling it the Whisper Room. Rachel moved out 2 months later. I haven't been back since, and I never will. I had just turned 25 and finally landed a steady job in the city. I'd been crashing with roommates up until then. Cheap places, too many people, not enough space. But I finally had the income to afford a small one-bedroom of my own. I found this place in an older building in a quieter part of town. The rent was reasonable, the landlord seemed chill, and the apartment, though dated, had character. Exposed brick walls, original hardwood floors, and those tall windows that let in a ton of light during the day. Felt right. Comfortable. There were only 4 units in the building. I was in 3B. Across the hall, in 3C, lived a man I never actually saw move in. I only knew someone was there because I'd hear the occasional door slam or footsteps in the hallway. Never voices. Never music. Just subtle signs of life. Sometimes I'd see packages outside his door. Never taken in, just left until someone eventually grabbed them. At first, I thought maybe he worked nights and slept during the day or was just one of those antisocial types. I didn't think much of it until the notes started. It was maybe 3 weeks into living there. I came home from work one night, and there was a sticky note on my door. Just one word, pretty, written in all caps with a Sharpie. I assumed it was a prank. Maybe one of the neighborhood kids. I peeled it off, tossed it, and moved on. Next night, another note. Red shirt. I froze, because I had been wearing a red shirt when I left that morning. That one didn't feel like a joke. I brought it inside, showed it to my friend over FaceTime. She told me to call the landlord. I said I would, but honestly, I wasn't sure what to even say. Someone's leaving post-it notes on my door doesn't exactly sound like a high-priority issue. Night 3, no note. I breathed a sigh of relief. Night 4, 2 notes. One on my door, nice smile. One on my doormat, I like your laugh. I hadn't laughed once all day. That's when it clicked. He was inside the building. He could hear me, maybe see me, maybe both. I went to the landlord the next morning, told him everything. He looked concerned but also kind of passive about it. Said he'd look into it. That was it. I asked about the guy in 3C. Oh yeah, Mr. Dobbins, he said. Older gentleman. Keeps to himself. Older gentleman? Every instinct in my body screamed that wasn't right. The notes felt younger, like someone closer to my age. I never heard a voice. No TV. No sounds of life. Just footsteps. Door creaks. Occasionally the faint sound of breathing. I started keeping my blinds shut, stopped playing music, ate with the lights off, anything to make myself feel less exposed. Then came the knock. It was a Thursday night, around 9:30. I had just finished dinner and was watching something on my laptop. 3 soft knocks on the door. Rhythmic, polite. I tiptoed to the peephole. No one. Not even a shadow. I waited a few minutes, then opened the door just enough to peek out. No one in the hallway, but on my doormat another note. You look lonely. That's when I bought the camera. I ordered one of those Wi-Fi security cameras you can stick right above your door. Motion activated. Sends clips to your phone. I set it up the next day. That night, no knock. No note. I thought maybe he saw the camera. Maybe it scared him off. Then the footage came in. 3:12 a.m. The camera caught movement. I opened the clip. There he was. Not an old man. Not at all. He looked maybe mid-30s. Skinny. Dark hoodie. Dirty jeans. His face was partially obscured by the angle, but I could see his eyes. Wide. Focused. He crept up to my door, held something in his hand. Looked like another sticky note, but froze when he spotted the camera. He stared at it, tilted his head, then slowly turned and walked away. He didn't go down the stairs. He walked into 3C. No key. No fumbling with a lock. Just pushed the door open and vanished inside. I called the landlord again. Told him to check the lease for 3C. I told him what I saw. He said, "That's impossible. Mr. Dobbins passed away last year. That unit's been empty since." That's when I called the police. They came, checked the hallway, checked 3C. The door was unlocked. Inside, nothing. No furniture. No lights. Just dust, old newspapers, and piles of sticky notes. Hundreds of them. On the walls, on the floor, on the windows. All with writing. Some were compliments. Others, not so much. Hair smells nice. She talks to herself. Thinks she's alone. I could take her tonight. The scariest part? Several of them had dates. And times. He had been tracking me since day one. I moved out that weekend. Didn't pack much. Didn't even clean. I just left. Took what I could fit in my car and never looked back. To this day, I still don't know who he was. Or how he got into 3C. The police never found him. The building's landlord said he changed the locks, installed more cameras, and eventually rented the place out again. But I wonder about the new tenant. Whether they hear the soft footsteps, or find the occasional note. And if they do, I hope they don't ignore it. Because sometimes the scariest things don't creak or scream or chase you in the woods. Sometimes, they leave you little pieces of themselves, right at your door. My father wasn't exactly what you'd call a warm man. He wasn't cruel or abusive, just cold, quiet, distant. We didn't do family dinners or father-daughter outings. When I was a kid, he'd grunt a few words in the morning, then disappear into work or vanish downstairs for hours at a time. I learned early on not to ask him questions. The few times I tried, the only thing he ever said back was, "Don't ask questions unless you're ready for the answers." When my mom died unexpectedly, I moved back into the house to help him out. I told myself it would only be temporary. A couple months, just long enough to settle the estate, help him organize things, maybe figure out if he needed to downsize. He didn't fight me on it, just gave a nod and went back to his crossword. The house was exactly as I remembered it. 2 stories and a finished basement, though finished was generous. From the outside, it looked like a normal suburban home. Trimmed hedges, cracked driveway, paint a little faded from time. Inside, though, the air always felt dense, like the house was holding its breath. Quiet, cold, and dim, even during the day. There was one rule I'd grown up with, one I knew better than to test. Don't go into the basement. I'd never been allowed down there as a kid. Not once. No matter how curious I got, the answer was always the same. It's just tools and junk. Dangerous stuff. No reason for you to be down there. But that didn't match what I'd heard. Late at night, I remember laying in bed and hearing noises, soft scraping sounds, slow dragging noises, and sometimes whispers. Not voices having a conversation. Not music. Not the hum of a washer. Whispers. Low, urgent, secretive. As an adult, I knew I could have gone down there if I wanted. I wasn't 12 anymore. But even when I moved back in, the rule stood. Stay out of the basement, he said the night I arrived.
No explained.
Just those 5 words. And like always, I listened. Weeks passed. We barely spoke. I worked remotely during the day, made dinner most nights, kept things clean. My father didn't say much. He stayed in his chair or holed himself up in his room. Never went upstairs. Never mentioned Mom. And never left the basement door unlocked. Then one night, just after 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It was faint but real. Not the house settling, not the wind outside. It was a voice. Help! I sat up. The sound was coming from below. Not the hallway. Not outside. Below. I crept out of bed and put my ear to the floor. Silence. Then again. Faint but clearer this time. Please. It was a woman's voice. I rushed to the hallway. The door to my father's room was closed. I knocked. No answer. I walked downstairs. The basement door was shut. I tried the knob. Locked. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. The next morning, I brought it up over breakfast. Dad, has anyone else ever stayed here? Like, in the house? He paused. No family? No renters or anything. He set down his coffee and looked me in the eye. Why are you asking? I shrugged. Just heard something. Thought maybe it was the pipes. He stared a second longer, then picked his mug back up and left the room. That night, I tried the basement door again. Still locked. So I got creative. I ordered a cheap snake cam online. Something small I could slide under the door. A few days later, it arrived. That night, I waited until my dad went to bed. Then I snuck downstairs and slipped the cable beneath the door. The camera streamed to my phone. The image was grainy, black and white. I saw stairs, cement floor, a single hanging bulb, then static, just for a second, then back to normal. But just as I was pulling the cable out, something moved at the bottom of the screen. Just a flicker, a quick shadow. It was enough to make me jolt and pull the whole thing back in. I didn't sleep that night. The following evening, around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Clear this time. Please help me. It wasn't faint anymore. It was urgent, desperate, and the voice was right below me. I ran out into the hall. The basement door was open. The knob turned effortlessly under my hand. I stood at the top of the stairs and looked down. Total blackness. I grabbed my phone flashlight and took the first step. Then another. Then one more. The smell hit me before the cold did. It was metallic, earthy, and sour, like old rust and wet dirt. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet rag. At the bottom of the stairs, I flicked the light switch. One dim bulb flickered on. The basement was bare. Cement floor, pegboard with rusted tools, a dusty workbench, some old crates in the corner. But against the far wall was another door. Newer wood, shiny silver handle, like it had been installed recently. It was slightly ajar. I walked over, reached for the handle, and opened it slowly. Inside was a smaller room.
No windows.
Just gray concrete walls, a stained mattress on the floor, a rusted metal bucket in the corner, and chains. 2 of them, bolted to the wall, with thick leather cuffs. I stumbled back, hit the wall. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. That's when I heard the click behind me. I turned. The basement door at the top of the stairs had shut. Then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Slow, steady. I gripped the flashlight, heart pounding. My father appeared. But it wasn't him. At least, not the version I remembered. His face was hollow. Sunken.
No warmth. No emotion.
He was holding a roll of duct tape in one hand, and in the other a knife. He didn't speak, just stared. I said, What is this?" My voice cracked. He stepped closer. I backed into the room with the chains, panicking, eyes darting around for something. Anything. He raised the tape. That's when I lunged. I grabbed a metal pipe leaning against the doorframe and swung as hard as I could. It hit his shoulder with a crack. He stumbled. I ran up the stairs, fumbling with the deadbolt. Finally got the door open. Bolted through the kitchen, out the front door, barefoot in the cold. I ran to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door until the lights came on. Police arrived 15 minutes later. They found my father in the basement, sitting on the mattress. Calm, silent. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't say a word. Inside that hidden room they found bloodstains, DNA samples, a drawer with hair, teeth, scraps of clothing, and photos, Polaroids, some old, some new. Some were of women I didn't recognize. But one was of me, taken from behind. While I was sitting at my laptop the night before, he'd been watching me. For weeks, investigators believe my mother may have known something, that she may have found out. I don't want to think about that. He never confessed to anything. They're still going through the evidence. I moved out of that house and never went back. I still have nightmares about the smell, the sound of the chains dragging across the floor, the look in his eyes as he stepped into the light. People talk about haunted houses, spirits, curses. But sometimes the scariest things don't come from outside. Sometimes they live right beneath you, in the walls you grew up in, and wear the face of someone you've loved your whole life. I'd never lived alone before. After my college roommate moved out and I landed my first real job, I was itching for independence. I signed a lease on this older one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city that had history. Brick buildings, wrought iron gates, fire escapes like something out of a noir film. It wasn't luxurious, but it had charm. The hardwood floors creaked a little, the windows rattled when it was windy, and the radiator made these little sighing sounds at night. I loved it. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. Until it didn't. It started with whispers. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway outside. My building had paper-thin walls and a couple of night owl neighbors, so I figured someone was on the phone late or watching a movie with bad headphones. But the whispers weren't muffled like voices through a wall. They were closer, sharper, and they weren't full sentences, just fragments. "Hey, can you hear me? Right here." I would pause what I was doing and listen, and then it would stop. The first time it really scared me was a night I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, and I heard it clear as day. "Behind you." I sat up instantly, heart racing, and whipped around. Nothing. Just the shadows my lamp cast on the wall. I told myself I was being paranoid, sleep-deprived. Maybe a neighbor had their TV on too loud again. Maybe I was overtired. Then I started noticing the air vent. It was this rectangular grate set into the wall across from my bed, standard stuff. But I'd never paid attention to it before. Now I couldn't stop staring. Every time I heard the whispers, they seemed to come from that direction. Not the window, not the hallway, the vent. One night I put my ear up to it. For a second, nothing. Then, "I knew you'd listen." I jumped back, stumbling and almost knocking over the lamp. My heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went down to the front office and asked if there were shared ducts between the apartments. The property manager said no. The old ventilation system had long been closed off and replaced by standalone units in each apartment. That vent? Purely cosmetic now. No active airflow. No connection. He saw the look on my face and asked, "Why?" I lied. Said I was just wondering why my place was always a little drafty. That night, I covered the vent with a thick towel and duct tape. I didn't hear anything for 2 nights. Then came the tapping. It started soft, barely noticeable. Then it got louder. Tap, 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 tap. 5 quick knocks. Paused. Then again. Tap, 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 tap. From behind the vent. I stared at it, frozen. It wasn't my imagination. Then a voice, louder now, right behind the thin towel. "Let me out." I tore the towel down and shined my phone light directly into the vent. I expected to see metal slats. Darkness. That's it. But behind the mesh, just barely visible, were 2 eyes. White. Staring. I screamed and bolted from the room. Called the police from the stairwell, shaking. They arrived within 15 minutes. They searched the apartment, opened the wall, pulled out the vent, looked behind it with flashlights. There was nothing. No sign of anyone. No tunnel. Just solid drywall behind a few inches of duct space. One officer pulled me aside and said, "Look, I believe you're scared, but there's no evidence of forced entry, and no place for someone to be hiding." I knew what I saw. The next day, I asked my downstairs neighbor if she'd ever heard anything weird. She looked hesitant, then said, "You know the girl who lived in your unit before you?" I didn't. She moved out suddenly, middle of the night. Said she kept hearing someone talking to her from the walls. I asked if she ever found out who it was. She said it was a girl. Said she sounded trapped. I didn't know what to say, just nodded and thanked her. That night, I made a decision. I set up my phone on a tripod, aimed it at the vent, and hit record. Left it filming all night while I tried to sleep in the living room. At 3:17 a.m., the video caught something. The towel I had put back over the vent, it fluttered slightly, then started pulling inward, like someone was grabbing it from the other side. It didn't fall. It was yanked, and for a brief second, barely a flash, a face appeared behind the vent. Pale, smudged with dirt, eyes bulging, lips curled into this grotesque, hopeful smile. And then it vanished. I moved out 2 days later, broke my lease, left half my furniture behind. But before I did, I went back to the manager and asked a different question. I asked if anyone had ever died in that apartment. He looked uncomfortable. After a long pause, he said, "There was a girl back in the 90s. Went missing. Lived in your unit. They searched the building. Never found her. Assumed she ran away. But I don't think she ran. I think she's still there. In the walls. Behind the vent. Waiting for someone else to listen." It started after I moved into my sister's apartment. She was going through a rough patch, divorce, job loss, you name it, and needed help with rent. I just finished grad school and hadn't found a place of my own yet, so I figured it would work for both of us. The apartment was nothing special, just a plain 2-bedroom in a boxy 3-story building on the edge of town. Quiet area. Mostly elderly residents or college kids who kept to themselves. First, everything was fine. We split the chores, ordered too much takeout, binged dumb shows, and tried to convince each other that things would get better. But my sister, she started changing. She got quieter, jumpy. She kept glancing down the hallway like she expected someone to be there. One night while brushing her teeth, she shut the bathroom door so quickly that it startled me. I asked her what was up, and she just shook her head and mumbled, "I don't like the hallway at night." I laughed, thinking she was half joking. "What's wrong with it?" She didn't answer. A few nights later, I found out for myself. I had just turned off the living room light and was walking toward my bedroom when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A shape, standing at the very end of the hallway. It was tall, still, almost blending into the darkness. I stopped mid-step, heart suddenly racing. I blinked. It was gone. I shook my head and chalked it up to a shadow. Maybe the streetlights outside casting weird angles through the blinds. I didn't even bring it up. But then it happened again. And again. Always late at night. Always in the same spot. At the very end of the hallway, just past the linen closet where the shadows pooled thickest. Sometimes it would be there for a full second before vanishing. Sometimes just a flicker. But every time it made the air feel colder. Heavier. Eventually, I told my sister. She didn't act surprised. Instead, she whispered, "You've seen him too?" My blood ran cold. She told me she'd been seeing him since the week after she moved in. A man. Very tall. No features. Just a silhouette. Sometimes she'd hear him too. Breathing at night, just outside her door. Or worse, tapping. Soft, deliberate taps on the wall near her head while she tried to sleep. I asked her why she hadn't told me sooner. She just said, "Because I thought I was losing my mind." I didn't think we were both imagining the same thing. That night, we slept in the same room. Nothing happened. The next night, I stayed up, sitting at the edge of the hallway, just out of sight, watching the shadows. I didn't even know what I expected to see. At 2:47 a.m., I heard something. 3 slow, heavy footsteps, coming from the dark end of the hallway. But the lights were off and I couldn't see a thing. I clicked on my phone flashlight and caught a glimpse of something tall ducking into the bathroom. I ran over, flipped on the light. Empty. I searched the entire place. All the closets. Even opened the attic hatch. Nothing. Then I checked my phone. The recording I'd started earlier? Corrupted. The audio file just played static. A week passed. Then things got worse. One night, I woke up unable to move. I know sleep paralysis. I've read about it. But this felt different. I wasn't just paralyzed. I felt held, pinned to the mattress by something that wasn't touching me. And in the darkness across the room, just beyond the glow of the night light, I saw him, the man, standing in the open doorway, still, watching, no eyes, no face, just a silhouette. His head barely cleared the top of the doorframe. Then he began to lean in, like his spine was bending at unnatural angles, his upper body lowering without taking a single step. Closer, closer. I wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. Then, my sister banged on the door, yelling my name, and just like that, he vanished. The paralysis lifted, and I gasped like I'd been holding my breath for hours. I told her what happened. She didn't question a word of it. That same night, we packed bags and left. Stayed at a friend's place across town. The next day, we brought a maintenance guy with us under the excuse of needing repairs. We didn't tell him what we were really doing. We just wanted to go in during the day and grab the rest of our stuff. While he was checking the bathroom pipes, I asked about the unit's history. He hesitated, then said, "You know the guy who lived there before you?" We didn't. He said, "Real quiet guy, kept to himself, lived alone, died in the hallway. They found him 3 days later." What happened? Heart failure. Collapsed near the linen closet. Nothing suspicious. But I saw the look on his face. He wasn't telling us everything. Before we left, I noticed something carved lightly into the inside of my bedroom closet door. 3 words. Shallow. Faded. Barely there. He watches still. We never went back. Even now, I don't sleep with my bedroom door open. I keep lights on. And if I ever catch a glimpse of something in the dark, I stare at it. I make sure it vanishes. Because I can't help but wonder, what if it followed us? What if it wasn't tied to the apartment, but to us? There was an old playground across the street from the apartment complex I used to live in. You know, the kind, half-rusted swing sets, cracked slide, seesaw that never sat level. The rubber matting underneath had peeled back in some places, exposing the concrete beneath. I moved into the unit facing it because the rent was cheap and the view of the open lot made the place feel less boxed in. During the day, it looked harmless. Sunlight spilling through the trees, pigeons fluttering around. Harmless. But at night, it changed. I noticed it the first week I moved in. I was up late unpacking, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, and I happened to glance outside. The swings were moving, not wildly, just a gentle back and forth, like someone had just gotten off moments earlier. Except there was no one out there. The streets were empty. It was close to 1 a.m. I told myself it was the wind. Even though nothing else was moving, no leaves, no trees, no other swings, just the two in the center. The next night, same thing. And the next. Always around 1 a.m., like clockwork. At first, I found it kind of eerie in a poetic way. Like the playground missed the sound of kids laughing and kept swinging just to remember. But then the laughter started. It was faint, distant, like a single child giggling somewhere out in the dark. It would go on for a few seconds, then stop, always between 1:0 and 1:10 a.m. I stopped sitting by the window after that. About a week later, I bumped into the old man who lived in the unit next to mine. He was taking out his trash, and I asked him, kind of offhand, if the swings across the street ever creep him out. He didn't even blink. "You heard the girl, huh?" I froze. "What girl?" He looked down the hallway before answering, like he didn't want anyone to hear. "There's always been a girl on the swings," he said, "since before I moved in. Some folks say she died there. Others think she's just stuck." "Stuck how?" He shook his head. "Don't watch too long. She don't like that." I laughed, hoping he'd laugh too. But he didn't. He just turned and walked back into his apartment. That night I couldn't sleep. Curiosity got the better of me. I sat in the dark with the lights off and watched. 1:02 a.m. The swings began to sway. Then the laughter. Crisp, clear, like it was happening right outside my window. And then I saw her. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting on the middle swing. Pale, shoulder-length hair. Wearing a dress that looked outdated, like something from the 90s or earlier. She didn't kick her legs or lean, just sat perfectly still, letting the swing move gently beneath her. I leaned in closer, pressing my forehead against the glass. She stopped swinging and turned her head toward me. She didn't move, didn't get off, just stared up at my window. I stumbled back, heart racing. I shut the blinds. The next morning, I convinced myself it was a trick of the light. My eyes playing tricks. Maybe someone's kid snuck out. Maybe I imagined the stare. But something had changed. From that night on, every morning when I left for work, I'd find small footprints in the dust on my balcony. Little barefoot prints. Right outside the sliding door. Even though I lived on the second floor and there was no fire escape. And the glass? Smudged, like a child had pressed their face to it. I set up a motion camera. That night I didn't sleep. I just waited. At 1:03 a.m., the alert came through. Motion detected. Balcony. I opened the app. The clip was only 6 seconds long. It showed my balcony empty. Then the screen went staticky for a split second. When it cleared, the girl was standing there, facing the camera, not smiling, not blinking, just staring into the lens with this cold, hollow look. And then gone. I deleted the footage, not out of denial, out of fear. I started staying out late, sleeping on friends' couches. I didn't want to be in that apartment at night. Then one afternoon, I came home and found something new on the balcony. A child's bracelet. Beads strung on elastic. Faded letters spelling out, Julie. I didn't know any Julies. Certainly not any kids. I brought it to the leasing office and asked if they knew the history of the place. The woman at the desk hesitated, said she'd check. The next day, she slipped a note under my door. Talk to the maintenance guy. His name's Ron. So I did. Ron was older, the kind of guy who looked like he'd been working there since the place was built. When I mentioned the name Julie, he got real quiet, said, "You should leave it alone." But I pressed. Finally, he told me, 20 years ago, there was a little girl named Julie who lived on the ground floor. Loved the playground, always out there. Her mom would watch from the window while she played. One night, she didn't come back in. They found her body under the slide the next morning. No signs of trauma, no foul play. It was as if she just died. Her mom moved out a week later, never spoke to anyone again. But ever since, people said they'd hear laughter at night, see a girl swinging alone. And the ones who watched too long, they didn't sleep. Some had nightmares. One tenant had to be hospitalized for anxiety and hallucinations. After that, Ron stopped renting out the unit that directly faced the swing set. Until I came along. I moved out within the week. Didn't ask for my deposit. Didn't care. But sometimes when I'm out late or near a park, or hear a swing creak, I still think I hear that faint little giggle. I never turn to look, because I remember what the old man said. She doesn't like to be watched. This happened 2 years ago, when I was working as a night security guard at a historic hotel in Pennsylvania. It was the kind of place that still had bellboys and rotary phones in the lobby for show. Super charming during the day, and unsettlingly quiet after midnight. My shift was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. I mostly just walked the halls, checked doors, logged reports. Nothing crazy. But this one night changed everything. It started around 2:30 a.m. when I was doing my rounds on the 3rd floor. I was walking past the guest rooms when I saw something that didn't make sense. Room 313. I stopped dead in my tracks. There was no room 313. I'd worked at the hotel for 8 months, and I knew every room by heart. The 3rd floor only had rooms 301 to 312. The hallway just ended after 312, where there was a maintenance closet and a dead-end wall. But here it was, a heavy wooden door with gold-plated numbers, 313, right where the hallway used to end. At first, I thought maybe someone installed a new room or changed the layout, but that made no sense. I'd been by this hallway earlier that same night. I walked up to it, heart thudding. The door looked old, like really old. Older than the rest of the hotel's vintage charm. This frame didn't match the other doors. The gold numbers were tarnished, almost blackened. I touched the doorknob. Ice cold. I radioed down to the front desk. "Hey, quick question. Is there supposed to be a room 313 now?" A long pause, then static. I tried again. "Can anyone hear me?" Nothing. I backed away from the door, looked down the hall, and realized I couldn't see the elevators anymore, or the corner that led back to the lobby stairs. It was like the hallway had stretched. The usual 40 feet now felt more like 400. The lights above flickered once. Then everything went dim. I turned back to room 313. The door was open, just a few inches. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct told me no. But I couldn't leave it like that. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pushed the door open. The room beyond was not a hotel room. It was old, like 1800s old. Oil lamps on the walls, a 4-poster bed with rotting drapes, wallpaper that was peeling and stained. The air smelled like wet paper and old blood. There was a chair in the corner facing away from me, and someone was sitting in it. I froze. "Hello," I said quietly. No response. I should have turned around. I should have walked out. But I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. I ran back and grabbed the handle, wouldn't budge. No lock, no deadbolt. Just stuck. The air got colder. Then the person in the chair slowly started to rise. They stood tall, thin, ragged clothes and turned around. It was a man, or what used to be one. His skin was gray, eyes sunken, mouth sewn shut with thick black thread. He stared at me and didn't move. Then I heard the whispering. Not from him, from the walls. It was all around me. Whispers layered on whispers, overlapping voices hissing in a language I couldn't understand. The man raised one bony arm and pointed to the corner behind me. I turned and saw something I'll never forget. There was another door, not an exit, smaller, narrow, more like a crawl space, and it was open. Inside I saw movement, shadows, crawling, twitching, pulling away from the light. Then I heard footsteps coming up behind me. I spun around, nothing. The man was gone. The chair was empty. The whispers got louder. I backed away toward the door, but the floor beneath me felt unstable, like it might cave in if I moved too fast. And then the lights went out completely. Just darkness. I used my phone flashlight again, but the battery was dead, even though it had been at 82% just minutes earlier. I stood in that pitch-black room, heart pounding, hands shaking, not knowing what was about to happen. And then, out of nowhere, the door behind me opened. The real one. The one that led back into the hallway. Light spilled in. I didn't question it. I ran. The hallway was normal again. The end was where it should have been. I could see the elevators, the red carpeting, the overhead lights. I turned back one last time. Room 313 was gone. Just a blank wall. No door. No number. Nothing. I radioed down again. This time someone answered. "You okay?" they asked. "We lost contact with you for about 20 minutes. I looked at my watch. It was 3:03 a.m. I could have sworn I was only inside that room for 5 minutes. 10 at most. I filed an incident report but left out most of the details. What was I going to say? Hey, a haunted door appeared. I met a stitched-up corpse, and I lost time? I didn't think anyone would believe me. A week later, I quit the job. But before I left, I asked the building manager, off the record, if there was ever a room 313. He looked at me, hesitated, then said, "Yeah, a long time ago, back when this place was a boarding house." "What happened to it?" He leaned in and said, "That part of the floor caught fire in 1904. One guest didn't make it out. They sealed the area off. Said it was easier than rebuilding." I asked, "Why the number?" He said, "They skipped it after that, out of respect, or fear." I never went back, but sometimes in old hotels I check the room numbers, just to be sure they go from 312 to 314. Because if you ever see a 313, don't open the door, even if it opens for you. My Aunt Karen always had this beautiful garden. It wasn't like a normal backyard garden with a few tomato plants and maybe some lavender in a pot. Hers was meticulous. Rows of trimmed hedges, paths lined with black stone, flower beds arranged by color and height, like a perfectly designed painting. Even the wind chimes matched the vibe, deep-toned, slow, almost funereal when the breeze passed through. Growing up, I loved visiting her house. She lived in a quiet part of New Hampshire, surrounded by woods, the kind of place where you could hear your own footsteps and the hum of bees in the summertime. But as I got older, I started noticing the little things, like how she never let anyone else help in the garden, or how she never ate anything from it, or how she had this habit of talking to certain plants in a whisper. My mom said Aunt Karen had always been a little different, and that I shouldn't worry about it. But I started worrying the summer I stayed with her alone. I was 19, My parents were going on a cruise and asked if I could house sit for my aunt while she recovered from a minor surgery. She'd broken her wrist and needed someone to help with groceries and basic chores for a week. Of course I said yes. I hadn't seen her in a while, and I figured it would be nice to unplug from everything and spend some time in the quiet. The first few days were fine, peaceful. Then she asked me to water the garden. Just the red blooms, she said. Only the reds. 1 pitcher each. At dusk. I didn't ask why. Just nodded and filled the watering can. That evening, I stepped out onto the garden path as the sun began to dip behind the trees. The air felt heavier than it should have. The reds were easy to spot. Roses, poppies, bleeding hearts, all planted in one circular bed near the center. I poured the water as instructed, 1 pitcher per plant. And that's when I heard it. The sigh. Soft. Slow. Human. I froze. It had come from behind me, near the back hedges. I turned around, nothing. Just the shadows creeping in as dusk deepened. I chalked it up to wind or maybe my imagination and went back inside. The next morning I noticed one of the red plants looked different. The stem was twisted, almost contorted. The petals were tighter, pulsing slightly like it was breathing. I blinked, shook my head, told myself I was overtired. That afternoon, while helping my aunt change the bandage on her wrist, I casually asked, "What's with the red plants?" She didn't answer for a second, then said, "They're older than they look." I thought she meant she'd planted them a long time ago. She added, "They remember." I laughed a little. "They remember what?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "People." I didn't ask any more questions. That night, I waited until after she went to bed. I couldn't shake the weird feeling I had. So I went back out to the garden, flashlight in hand. I crouched next to the red ring and examined the soil. Something wasn't right. The dirt didn't smell like dirt. It had a sweet, sickly odor. And when I dug in just a little with my fingers, I hit something hard. Not a rock. Smooth. Round. I pulled it out slowly. It was a tooth. Human. I dropped it and stumbled backward, heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I told my aunt I had to leave early. Family emergency. She just nodded like she already knew. I drove straight to my parents' place. A week later, I came back with police. They dug up the garden. Underneath the red bed, they found bones. 6 full skeletons. Buried vertically, fetal position. Like seeds planted in rows. DNA testing matched one of them to a woman who went missing from the area in 1992. My aunt was arrested, but she never said a word. Not during questioning. Not during trial. Not even when they sentenced her to life. She just kept whispering to herself. Smiling. The strangest part? The garden kept growing. After she was taken away, the red blooms came back the next spring. Richer, taller, more vibrant than before. No one watered them. No one touched them. They thrived anyway. They exhumed everything. Leveled the soil. Burned the roots. Paved over the yard. But when I drove past the property last fall, something caught my eye. A single red flower. Growing through the asphalt. Bigger than the others. Facing the road. Like it was waiting. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. For more true horror, unsettling encounters, and the stories that keep you up at night, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be waiting with more.